In the Old Testament reading today, we hear the first call to holiness. It's the call that God gives to the Israelites when he lays down the law and he says, "Be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy." It's interesting to note as well in this reading that every time the Lord gives a command, he says, "I am the Lord." So whenever we think of the law of the Lord and the call to holiness, we should always consider that we're not just called to be holy for an arbitrary reason, to be set apart from the nations or anything like that. We're actually called to be holy in order to be like the one who is holiness itself, that is God, in order to enter into the fullness of relationship with him. God himself, being perfect, cannot be other than he is, and if he were to be other than he is, it would be to be imperfect. But as human beings, we are called to be perfect as our Heavenly Father is perfect, as we hear earlier in the Gospel of Matthew. And that call to perfection is ultimately the call to holiness. It's the call for every single human person. And it's not to be done in a rigid kind of way, but rather by God's grace and inviting him into our weakness. And that is the call, a big part of the call of Lent. It's a call to again turn our eyes towards our ultimate purpose as human beings, which is the holiness, to attain to the holiness without which we will not see the face of God, as the scriptures tell us. The psalm today is a beautiful reflection on the beautiful psalm, the longest psalm, on Psalm 118, which meditates on the law of the Lord, which is long but worth reading, and it is a beautiful reflection on a theme consistent throughout the psalms of the law of the Lord and how it leads us unto God. And then finally, with the gospel today, we have this dramatic apocalyptic account, really, of the final judgment, which is something that is very much beyond our consciousness in these days. But it's interesting to note how this judgment will occur in this 21st century, where so often we're caught up in identity politics, where people are divided into different classes and races and genders. We note that in the account of the gospel today, where we have the parable of the goats and the sheep, it's every individual human being, regardless of his race, ethnicity, gender, age, will be divided. Every single person is either a goat or a sheep. It doesn't matter. Everything else sort of fades into irrelevance. And the criteria for whether you are blessed or cursed really is whether we hear from Christ's word. He says, "Come you that are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you gave me clothing. I was sick and you took care of me. I was in prison and you visited me." And the righteous, they'll say to the Lord, when do we see you in all these conditions? And he said, "Truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these members who are my family, you did it to me." And it's a very profound answer if we really meditate on it. Mother Teresa had a beautiful reflection for her sisters that she would give as an examen of conscience. It was five words, one for each finger. "You did it to me." And that's something that we can reflect on in Lent, that ultimately we'll be judged at the end of our life, as St. John of the Cross tells us, on our love. And the ultimate way that love is proved is through love of neighbour. So let us turn again to the Lord in holiness and love of neighbour this Lent.